Messi kissed it, Maradona lifted it. Some of the greatest players in history have touched it. That's what makes it special. But hold up, that's only the tip of the iceberg. So let's figure out why does this FIFA World Cup trophy look so different from others. But before we go any further, I've got to confess something. For the longest time, I thought it was just a football trophy, or at most a fancy golden cup. But the more I dug into it, the less it felt like some regular old trophy. So what is this thing really? I mean, who would have thought a football trophy could look more at home in a luxury jewelry showcase than at the biggest football tournament on earth? No way. But then it made me wonder, maybe we have been focusing on the wrong part of the story this whole time. Or maybe the real surprise has been hiding in plain sight all along. Alright, I'm Sepide, I decode jewelry through art, marketing, and culture. And today I want to show you why the FIFA World Cup trophy is not what you think it is. Alright, let's break this thing down together. So, if this trophy is that really different, then one question immediately comes to mind. Who's behind it? And funny enough, billions of people have seen his work, entire generations know the silhouette on sight, yet almost nobody knows the name behind it. Yeah, Silvio Gazzania. But before anything else, here's the part that genuinely surprised me. Gazzania wasn't the kind of guy sitting around sketching sport equipment. I mean, that wasn't really his world. I feel this Italian sculptor approached his project very differently. Almost like he wasn't even trying to make just another trophy. That wasn't the goal. Instead, he started with an idea, an image, and then he set out to turn it into something physical. From what I can tell, he was trying to capture a feeling and then quietly pull you into it without you even realizing it. In this case, maybe the feeling of reaching the very top. And here's a twist. As you start looking at the trophy through that lens, everything starts falling into place. Because let's be real, now we're not talking about a simple sport trophy anymore. We're looking at a piece of art and it's got something to say. But there's still one question that kept bugging me. How exactly did he pull that off? Well, maybe the answer's been sitting right in front of us. I guess the best way to understand what was going through his mind is to stop looking at the man for a moment and start looking at the trophy itself, because it might hold the answer, which brings us to the first piece of the puzzle. I mean, the material. Alright, here's the thing. Not gonna lie, when I first looked at the trophy, I thought the whole story was the gold. I mean, hard not to. This thing weighs around 13.5 pounds. So yeah, when something weighs that much and is made from 18 karat gold, your brain immediately goes, okay, that's where the value comes from. At least that's what I assumed. So I figured, alright, case closed. But then something caught my eye. That greenish stone at the bottom. I mean, the malachite. And then I ran into something that completely flipped the script. You know what? Malachite isn't some ultra luxurious, eye-catching gemstone. If anything, quite the opposite. It's actually considered a semi-precious stone. But seriously though, why malachite? If the goal was pure value, there were plenty of more expensive stones. Emeralds, rubies, sapphires, all of them would have looked way more impressive, way more flashy. But Gazzania went with malachite out of all the stones he could have picked. Honestly, I kind of admire that move. He didn't seem all that concerned with the status or prestige. To me, that choice says a lot more about the designer than it does about the stone. It feels like the color, the natural patterns, and those mesmerizing veins running through it mattered more to him than the prestige or the bragging rights. Almost as if the message came first and everything else came second. But what was he actually trying to say beyond the aesthetics? Just imagine this for a sec. If Gazzania had gone with an emerald instead, what vibe would the trophy give off? And the whole thing start to feel more like a piece of royal regalia than something built for sport. At least that's how it looks to me. And honestly, I think Gazzania was onto something. You know what? Sometimes it feels like the gold or even the most expensive gemstones isn't even the most interesting part. Instead, the strategy behind the design is. That's how a true luxury designer thinks, putting the story ahead of the price tag, and that's when the penny dropped. Sometimes the most important material in a luxury object isn't the most expensive one. It's the one that tells the story the designer wants to tell. And when you really get down to it, that green ring does a lot more than just decorate the bags. It grounds the whole sculpture. Almost feels like a symbolic football field. Or maybe the earth itself. Either way, it gives the gold something to rise from. That's kind of mind blowing. But hold that thought, because we are not done yet. We're still missing a piece of the puzzle. You know what? That got me thinking. Ksenia doesn't strike me as the kind of designer who leaves things to chance. So, with that in mind, if even the stone was chosen that intentionally, I wonder if the shape was as well. That's where things get really interesting, because the material, that's only half the story. Now, let's talk about the form. So, what are we actually looking at here? Honestly, the first thing that jumped out at me was two human figures rising upward, holding the world above their heads. Right? That's the obvious reading anyway. For a second I thought of Atlas, but then I realized something. Atlas carries the world alone, but these figures, they're carrying it together, and that's a pretty important distinction. And then one thing that immediately caught my eye was the composition, because technically those two figures are facing opposite directions. And yet somehow they still feel connected as a single united form, like they're part of the same movement. And I think a big part of that comes from the strange power of the circle. You've probably noticed this already. Designers have been obsessed with circles forever. And yeah, this is where things start falling into place. In other words, on the surface, they almost look like two rivals facing off, two teams going head to head, but the circular composition does something really clever. It allows the two figures to stand in opposition while still feeling like they're moving along the same path. Maybe not side by side, but close enough to feel connected. See the subtle trick here? They're competing, but they still feel like part of the same story. And that really blew my mind. It fits the spirit of the football perfectly, because at its core, football is a team sport. No matter how great the superstar is, nobody wins a World Cup alone. That's some pretty creative symbolism, isn't it? Well, wait, it gets better. Now, skip the figures for a second, just look at the lines, the flowing curves, those elongated bodies. Look how the entire composition twists outward. What does that feel like to you? Because to me, it almost feels like all the energy has been building up at the bottom and then suddenly erupts toward the sky. And interestingly enough, that's pretty close to how Gazzaniga described it himself. The lines rise from the base, spiraling outward toward the world above. I don't know if you have heard this before, but in art, spirals are often associated with growth, evolution, ascent, which leads directly into something that's basically part of Gazzaniga's design signature. I mean, dynamism, something driven by movement and energy. I mean, that emotional explosion that happens when somebody reaches the top. That's why the forum feels alive. You see what I'm getting at? The trophy not only shows the victory, but also the journey toward it. Is managed to freeze an emotional moment without making it feel frozen. And honestly, it seems there was a lot more going on beneath the surface. Believe it or not, even the slight asymmetry is helping sell that sense of movement. I mean, would a perfectly symmetrical version really feel this energetic? Probably not. Perfect symmetry tends to feel stable and controlled, but this doesn't. This thing feels dynamic, like it's still moving, like the energy hasn't settled yet. And honestly, I think that's what makes it work. But here's something else I wasn't expecting. Is it actually normal for a sculpture like this to not really have a front? Because most sculptures have a preferred viewing angle, a hero shot. But this one, not really. You can walk around it, look at it from pretty much any angle you want. Just try not to get dizzy while doing it. And somehow, the composition still works. You know what? Pulling off a true 360 degrees sculpture is a lot harder than it sounds. Anyway, the cool detail that threw me for a little wasn't the 360-degree design. It was far more subtle than that, and I genuinely love it. Now, come a little deeper down the rabbit hole with me, and this time it's down at the base. Look closely. The gold surface above looks shiny, smooth, polished, but the base, not quite. It's rough, textured, slightly uneven, and honestly, I love that contrast because it feels incredibly deliberate, as if it's a neo wanted the foundation itself to represent struggle, tension, maybe the difficult road to victory. See where I'm going with this? In fact, he once described the figures as emerging from a rough mess, not from perfection or something polished, but from something raw. And once you start looking at the trophy in that light, suddenly the whole story changes. Now, it's not just about holding the world above your head, it's about everything that came before that moment. The near misses, the setbacks, the sacrifices, the years of chasing something that seemed impossible. And then one day, all that effort finally pays off, and you finally earned the right to stand at the top, to lift the world above your head. That's what makes it feel so much bigger than a trophy. Because the trophy doesn't just celebrate the destination, it tells the story of the journey that got you there. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I can't help feeling there's something incredibly thoughtful about that. Oh, by the way, there is another detail we haven't touched on yet. Any idea who those two are supposed to be? Seriously. Pele, Maradona, some legendary footballers? Turns out, none of them. They're intentionally anonymous because the sculpture wasn't gonna be dedicated to one player or one generation. In fact, it's about anyone who's ever dreamed of lifting that trophy, and that's what those figures represent. Not a player, not a team, but humanity. Now, here's something I couldn't stop thinking about. Plenty of trophies are expensive, a lot of them are well designed with a meaning behind them, but very few become iconic. Honestly, I don't think the sheer use of so much gold in the piece can explain it on its own. Absolutely not. Neither the gold nor the symbolism. So, what does? Why is this still the trophy people can recognize instantly half a century later? Okay, for a second, set everything we have talked about aside, because I think part of the answer lies somewhere else. I mean, in its silhouette. Now, try something for me. Forget the gold, forget the figures and the glow, forget the details I taught you, just picture the outline, like the shadow, the shape. Chances are your brain fills in the blanks immediately, and honestly, that's a rare gift. The reason is simple. Being recognizable from the outline alone is incredibly rare. I'm not even kidding. In branding, that's the holy grail, and any designer who can pull that off has basically won the game. Think about it. The Chanel No. 5 bottle, the outline alone gives it away. A Rolex Submariner, same thing. I mean, in all of these examples, the silhouette is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the brand's visual identity. And somehow the World Cup trophy ended up in that club too, which isn't something you'd normally expect from a sport trophy. Most trophies are interchangeable, swap one for another, and most people wouldn't even notice. But this one, totally different story. You could spot it from the other side of a stadium, from a blurry photograph, even from a shadow. And keep in mind that once a design reaches that point, it's no longer just an object. It's become an icon. And honestly, it kind of got me curious, like, what did those earlier trophies even look like? And what actually was their whole deal? Once I started comparing it to older trophies, Gazzaniga's design literally stood out even more. At least to me. But why does this World Cup trophy actually look so different from almost every trophy that came before it? Let's rewind quickly for a second. Most traditional trophies follow a pretty familiar formula. They feel symmetrical, formal, still. By the way, before the current trophy, FIFA used the JewelryDesign trophy. And if you put the two side by side, chances are you've seen her before. The jewelry made trophy featured Nike, the Greek goddess of victory, very classical, very much rooted in mythology. And there's nothing wrong with that because for centuries artists used gods and goddesses to represent greatness. But by the 20th century, things were changing. And here's the point. When Gazzaniga got the chance to redesign the World Cup trophy, he could have played it safe. Another goddess, another borrowed myth from ancient history, the safe choice, right? But he didn't do that, not even close. And that's where things start to connect. Just so you know, weirdly enough, that one decision plays out through almost everything we have talked about so far. Instead, he made people the heroes, and that puts everything in a different light. Think about it. Suddenly, the story isn't about divine victory anymore, but about human achievements, human struggle, human ambition. You feel me? That's a pretty bold move. Now, the heroes aren't up in the heaven. They're right here. They're us. They're footballers. This way of thinking feels very 20th century, a period where design increasingly moved away from mythology and toward humanity. Once you see that, that's bigger than a design choice. It's almost a philosophical one, which is probably why the trophy still low-key feels contemporary today, feels timeless. You feel me? Trends change, styles change, but those human emotions, they don't. People have always related to that feeling. They still dream about it. And surprisingly, suddenly the entire design started making even more sense. But here's the funny part I didn't see coming. I was like, wait, what? You're telling me they give it back? I mean, after all the World Cups I've watched over the years, I just kind of assumed the champions took the trophy home. But here's the kicker. They don't. Not even the World Cup champions. Back in the day, the World Cup trophy wasn't something you just won and passed around like a relay baton forever. Normally, the champion would hold it for about 4 years and then hand it back to FIFA before the next tournament. Same trophy, new winner, repeat. Weirdly enough, there was one moment in history where things went a little different. We're going back to 1970s. Brazil had just won the World Cup for the third time. And there was this insane rule in FIFA at the time that if a team won it 3 times, the trophy wasn't just theirs for a while, it became theirs permanently. Like no return, no handover, end of the story. So yeah, Brazil didn't just lift the cup in 1970s. They cemented their place in history and took it home for good. That's serious. That original trophy though, yeah, it never made its way back. But from 1974 up to now, things changed. The actual FIFA World Cup trophy never permanently belongs to the winning team ever. The champions get to hold it, celebrate with it, take the photo, have their country's name engraved on it, but after the ceremony is over, the original trophy goes right back to FIFA Museum, and the team receives just an official replica instead. And that's where things get wild, because if the original trophy never leaves FIFA, then that means every champion has had their hands on the same trophy. Wrap your head around that for a second. It made me think about something. Trophy Messi lifted in 2022, and the trophy Maradona lifted in 1986. The trophy Zidane stood beside. I mean, that's literally the same trophy for over 50 years. The more that it stuck with me, the more fitting it felt. Because suddenly it isn't just an object anymore. It becomes a front row seat to football history. Generations after generations, era after era, champions come and go. The trophy stays put, just sitting there, watching it all happen, still carrying all those stories with it. And maybe that's why it carries so much weight. Not physical weight, historical weight. And maybe that's why it's stood the test of time, thanks to everything it's seen. Okay, so let's go back to where we started, because at the beginning of this video I said something that probably sounded like a stretch at first. I said the FIFA World Cup trophy isn't really what most people think it is. And you know what? It's kind of hard to unsee that now, because when you peel back the layers, a really thoughtful piece of design starts to take shape. Alright, Now, think about all the pieces we have put together. The golden malachite, the silhouette and form, the fact that every detail feels intentional. Suddenly, when you step back and look at the whole thing, all roads lead back to the same idea, turning victory into a piece of art, not as a result, but as a lived experience. And it turns out that's usually how the really great luxury pieces come to life. Not by asking how do we make this look expensive, but by asking what's the story here. You know what? At the end of the day, that's what completely changed the way I look at this trophy. Because I don't think Gazzaniga was trying to design just a trophy. I think he was trying to freeze a moment in time. That split second when years of failure, ambition, fear, and hope all come to a head. To me, the trophy isn't really about football. It's about chasing something that's always just beyond your grasp. Alright, now I'm curious with the 2026 World Cup coming up. Who do you think gets their hands on this masterpiece next? Drop it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this kind of rabbit hole, you're gonna like what's coming next. Because one thing I've learned is that jewelry and fashion wonders show up in the most unexpected places. A football trophy, a royal crown, some random movie prop, and honestly, those are the stories I love digging into. So, if you're into design, symbolism, luxury, and the weird little connections nobody talks about, then trust me, you're gonna fit right in.